Welcome to Field 302, Study Session 2, Philosophical Writing versus Scientific Writing. Introduction. In this study session, an attempt shall be made to elaborate more clearly on what it means to research and write within the sphere of philosophy as distinct from scientific research and writing. It is important to draw such a distinction in order to avoid slipping from one into the other while researching and writing. Science has no doubt gained a strong popularity in the last 2 centuries and continues to do so to the extent that scientific research and writing is given priority in school curricula, academic sponsorship, scholarship, journal, and book publishing and the like. The elevation of science has often been done without regards for other modes of inquiry that do not employ the method of science, such as inquiries in the humanities and in philosophy in particular. However, although the scientific community has labored earnestly to enthrone the scientific method as the only valid method of inquiry, other modes of inquiry continue to thrive. It is thus essential to draw a clear-cut distinction at this point between philosophical and scientific inquiry or research. To achieve these, we shall examine the primary characteristics of both forms of inquiry, their object of study, and the method employed therein. Objectives. The objectives of this study session are to draw a distinction between writing and research in philosophy and in the sciences based on their object of study and method of study, to elaborate more on the nature of philosophical inquiry and research, science as descriptive and philosophy as normative. Science as an academic discipline studies natural objects and events in the universe in order to discover regularities and laws governing them. Scientific research or writing does not create the natural world. Rather, it observes by experimentation and records what has been observed by description. Science is thus primarily a descriptive discipline, although every now and then theoretical construct in science bears elements of normativity that quickly turns them to philosophical issues, particularly in epistemology and the philosophy of science. Science is taught to describe the natural objects and events in the universe as it is. It does not focus on painting a normative picture of the world or providing a normative understanding of the universe. Its approach to the universe is ideally experimental and descriptive. Philosophical inquiry, research, or writing, on the other hand, is primarily normative or prescriptive. It is concerned with how things ought to be viewed rather than how they are viewed or understood. Its inquiry into the nature of reality, knowledge, and values does not require the observation of particular things or events or the gathering of particular data, but a prescriptive interpretation and analysis of already available data, generalization, and information about the universe. But differently, questions such as, what is real? Is there an ultimate reality? How do we know what we claim to know? What makes an action moral? What is the best form of human society and the state? Cannot be resolved by merely describing things and events in the universe. Rather, they are best resolved through a rational prescriptive inquiry into the nature of things. This does not in any way imply that philosophical inquiry does not need the services of science or vice versa. While philosophers may, from time to time, make use of scientific generalization or result, they generally avoid the scientists' specialized business of collecting and arguing about empirical data and confine their investigation to their armchairs. Sometimes, empirical evidence from psychology, physics, or other fields of inquiry can be put to good use in philosophical arguments. But using such evidence from elsewhere does not solve any philosophical question. A writer in philosophy must be ready to explain exactly why such empirical evidence is relevant and exactly what normative principles one can conclude from. Apart from these, philosophers still find a lot to argue about, even when they put empirical questions aside. For one thing, the question of what sort of empirical evidence will be needed to describe the answer to a question might itself be a non-empirical question that philosophers discuss. For another, philosophers spend a lot of time discussing how different claims relate logically to each other. For example, a common philosophical project is to show how two or more views cannot be held consistently with each other, or to show that although two views are consistent with one another, they together entail an implausible third claim. Therefore, an important distinction between writing and research in science and philosophy is the famous is or ought distinction, or the descriptive or prescriptive distinction. While science provides us with a description of the world, philosophy offers us a normative analysis of the world and of human existence. Object of study. Flowing from the descriptive or prescriptive distinction, the object of study in scientific and philosophical research and writing varies. When we research or write, it is always about something or someone. Research always has an object in focus, but the kind of object varies based on the nature of the discipline. Science, as basically a descriptive discipline, describes objects and events in the physical universe. Its sub-disciplines in the natural, social, and applied sciences are specialized in the study of a particular object or sphere of the material universe. Biology studies and describes the nature and content of biological components and organisms of the universe. Chemistry has the chemical constituents of the material universe as its object of study. Psychology is the scientific study of human brain, processes, and mental state. Hence, every specialized scientific discipline has a specialized and identifiable object of study. But it is difficult to identify or specify the subject matter or object of study of philosophy the way we can specify the concerns of scientific disciplines such as economics, biology, chemistry, physics, and psychology. It is thus not surprising for new students in philosophy to ask their tutor after some lectures, what exactly are they studying? The difficulty of identifying the object of study of philosophy does not imply that philosophical inquiry, research, or writing is not intended towards something. It is, however, the case that, unlike scientific disciplines, which study specific objects in the universe, reveal specific information about them by gathering particular individuated facts or data about their objects of study, the subject matter of philosophy are general in nature. Philosophical questions are not intended towards a specific object in the universe, nor are they meant to reveal specific information about their nature through the individual data collected. Rather, philosophical questions are general in nature. This is because dealing with such research questions in philosophy does not require the gathering of specific data or the accumulation of particular facts. It rather involves how best to explain and analyze the already available facts to make sense of them in the research for answers for the ultimate question of reality, knowledge, and value. Philosophical research and writing are identified not only by the general nature of the subject matter they address, but also by their fundamental nature. Not every scientific research interests each one of us in our everyday lives. The study of planetary bodies and how life can survive there, or the accumulation of information of the psychology of a lion may not immediately interest us, even if there are reasons to believe that at the long run, such information may be useful for mankind. However, every philosophical question that drives research and writing in philosophy should interest any rational human being, because the questions are essentially concerned with human existence and survival, and the answers given them and the answers we accept about them directly affect how we behave. Thus, questions about reality, knowledge, morality, or the ideal state are not trivial but fundamental. Thus, while scientific research has specific subject matter, philosophical inquiry deals with general and fundamental questions about reality, knowledge, and value. To experiment and to draw conclusions. To engage in philosophical inquiry is to theorize, to analyze, to critique, to raise questions about, and to pose as problematic that which we investigated. Method of study. Science has a popular method of studying the nature of the universe. So popular and infamous that it has been and continues to be imposed on other disciplines or forms of life as the model rather than a model of research. This method is referred to as a scientific method. The scientific method is generally regarded as a procedure employed in carrying out research in sciences, or, put differently, it is concerned with principles of evaluation of statements in the empirical sciences. As R.S. Rudner explains, the methodology of a scientific discipline is not a matter of its transient technique, but of its logic of justification. The method of science is indeed the rationale on which it bases its acceptance or rejection of hypotheses or theories. Thus, when people talk of the scientific method, they are simply referring to the general properties and considerations that are used in the confirmation or refutation of a hypothesis in the various sciences. That is, the common way in which hypotheses are assessed or researches are carried out in the sciences. As a method of research, the scientific method is said to be identified with a number of procedural stages, phases, or steps. Scholars are generally not unanimous about the exact number of the research stages in the scientific method. According to C.A. Gale, that there is no consensus on the exact number of stages in the method does not imply that scientific method cannot be characterized generally as consisting in, for example, a concern for explanatory adequacy, how that adequacy is conceived, and insistence on testing. However, testing is taught to be best done, and a commitment to inductive support. Kwasi Wiredu gives an opposite characterization of the scientific method. According to him, the method of science involves hypotheses, experiment, and observation. Scientific method as its practice attained a high degree of complexity, but in bare essentials, it is characterized as follows. The mind is challenged by a problem about for a solution, such that however plausible the solution may be, it is not immediately asserted as true. It is merely entertained as hypothesis, a tentative proposal to be put to the test. But before that, its significance has to be explored. That is, its logical implication have to be unraveled in conjunction with other known facts. This is the stage of the elaboration of the hypothesis, which often requires techniques of deduction available only in quite advanced mathematics. The result, however, is always of the logical form of an implication. If the hypothesis is true, then such and such other things should be the case. The stage is then set for empirical confirmation and disconfirmation. Straightforward observation or very technical experiment may be called for in this stage of confirmation or disconfirmation. If results turn out not to be in agreement with the implication of the hypothesis, it is said to be falsified. It is accordingly either abandoned or modified. On the other hand, if results prove to confirm to the elaborated hypothesis, it is said to be confirmed. It is the confirmed hypothesis that are regarded as laws and constitute the main corpus of scientific knowledge. According to Siegel, what is striking about the method of science is its commitment to evidence and to the form of reasoning as described above, which is what ensures the objectivity and rationality of science. In other words, science is rational to the extent that it proceeds in accordance with such a commitment of evidence or form of reasoning. That is, this is what gives the scientific method its popularity. But philosophical inquiry cannot be associated with any such particular method of study due to the general nature of its inquiry. Thus, although philosophy is a rational inquiry, there is no clearly stated method of carrying out its inquiry as it is the scientific method. Rather, there are varieties of method based on the philosophical camp or approach. To be sure, every rational inquiry, such as philosophy, begins with doubt and ends with the establishment of belief, which also becomes a source of further inquiries. However, in philosophy, there is no singular and generally acceptable process of arriving at established beliefs or theories as we may find in science. There are varying methods. The history of philosophical inquiry brings to our attention such philosophical methods as Socratic method, the dialectical method, the Cartesian method, the phenomenological method, the speculative method, or the method of abstraction. For instance, the Socratic method consists of a number of stages. First, he presents his philosophical views in an everyday conversation, casually mentioning them to his companions and engaging their interest. Second, it would point out a certain philosophical concept that needed to be analyzed. Third, it would profess ignorance and ask his companions his opinion on the other matter. When giving the other person's answer, Socrates would analyze their definition by asking questions that expose its weakness or wrongness. Once again, the person will provide another definition, revised more clearly this time, and again, Socrates will repeat the process of questioning, exposing weaknesses of revised definition. They continue in this way until the clearest definition of the question is reached. In this manner, Socrates would also cause the person to realize his own ignorance, which is the first step. According to Socrates, they continue in this way until the clearest definition of the question is reached. In this manner, Socrates would also cause the other person to realize his own ignorance, which is the first step, according to Socrates, to wisdom. Socrates also employed in this method the use of reduction and absurdum form of argument, which means reducing to an absurdity. It will begin by assuming that his companion's offered definition is true, but then show that it logically implied either an absurdity or a conclusion that contradicted other conclusions previously drawn by his companion. By exposing a false statement from the proposition, it skillfully proved that the assumption, rationality, must be false, although sometimes quite frustrating to one of Socrates' converse with. The method combined with the reduction and absurdum argument proved effective and eye-opening. Thus, it is essential that students and researchers are familiar with the multiple methods of philosophy and apply them in the best possible research cases, since the particular issue being researched or written on may determine the method adopted. Summary. Philosophical inquiry is different from scientific inquiry, mainly due to its normative character and the vagueness of subject matter and method. Philosophy does not have an identifiable particular domain as its subject matter. It attempts to think about the widest context, that which is not differentiated as one part of other parts. If it were a discipline focused only with an aspect of reality, it would at least be vaguely comprehended as being something other than, say, mathematics or sociology. That is, something that studies this domain as opposed to that. Philosophy leaves nothing out, and hence leaves us without the contraction forward that will allow us to say what it is. People who are unfriendly to philosophy suspect that it is inflated, presumptuous, and non-rigorous. This feeling is an inadequate but understandable way of recognizing the fact that philosophy is not defined by being a discipline that is concerned with other aspects of existence or reality. Again, the method of philosophical thinking is not obvious. We think we have some idea of the matter in which, say, physicists or linguists proceed the inquiry. But how do philosophers proceed in theirs? It is hard to say. Philosophy appears to be an arcane intellectual discipline, a form of thinking whose ways are esoteric and obscure. However, when carefully studied, we can become familiar with its methods and subject matter, no matter how general they may be. This is the end of study session 2. Thanks for listening.